when you're time limited, then you have to be very careful about your consistency. The pros also, in my opinion, should be, but that's a classic thing to say, consistency is key. Well, it is actually. And when you go down to a person who puts in 8 to 15 hours compared to, let's say, 15 to 30, 40 hours, consistency becomes a bigger factor, because that foundation of aerobic fitness you have are a little more fragile on an age grouper than it is on a pro, because they have some bigger blocks at a bigger certain amount of volume at times, which gives that foundation is more solid.
The Triathlon Show 231. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host, Michael, and on today's episode, I interview coach Frank Jakobsen. Frank is a Danish triathlon coach who came into triathlon from a background in elite swimming and later on alpinism. He gained most of his initial credibility from mentoring and advising Ironman World Champion Craig or Crowie. And since that, he has coached a large number of professional long-distance triathletes. So in this episode, we will go into a discussion on all sorts of aspects related to triathlon training, performance, and things like mindset and goal setting as well. But before the interview, I want to make a quick mention of a couple of house cleaning items that I'll go into more detail on after the interview. And the first one of those is that I have created a free training plan for these COVID-19 times. So that means only bike and run and strength and conditioning. And that plan is available at 3 different volumes. So 7 hours per week, 12 hours per week, and 17 hours per week. And again, it is free. Anybody can go and download it. So I'll talk a little bit more about that after the interview. And the second quick mention that I'll make after the interview is about the updated protocol, much improved protocol for the inside testing that I offer as a service. So that will be after the interview. If you're interested in any of those topics, don't tune out when the interview is over. Big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that you can find on precisionhydration.com. They create electrolyte products that can help you individualize your electrolyte intake so that you can maintain your performance even in long races and hot conditions, even if you are somebody who loses a lot of sodium in your sweat. And the whole premise of that is that there is a large variance between individuals in how strong of a concentration of sodium you have in your sweat. So some people might need very little or no electrolyte supplementation, but for others, it can be really critical to having a good performance in racing and also in training. And that's something that I definitely notice because I sweat a lot and my sweat is very salty. And when I do my long indoor rides on the trainer, the way that I do things right now, staying inside and training, then I do notice a difference in performance when I supplement adequately with electrolytes versus when I don't. Plus, it's also just as a little bit of an added bonus, a very tasty drink. So check them out on precisionhydration.com and get 15% off your order with the promo code THATTRIATHLONSHOW15. And thank you to Roka. Roka has just recently launched a new and very exciting product, the Matador sunglasses. And these sunglasses have the most game-changing design and tech specs that Roka has created so far, with everything that they've had in their previous glasses, like Geeko anti-slip technology, really premium lenses with encodings, fog resistance, fingerprint resistance, and so on, super light. But they have made a lot of improvements to the lenses and the optics as well. So these glasses are really something else. Go and check them out on roka.com and go through the landing page roka.com/TTS to get a 20% discount on your Matador sunglasses or whatever products you choose to shop for on Roka's website. Now, without any further ado, here's the interview with Frank Jakobsen. Welcome to That Triathlon Show, Frank. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you. You?
I'm good as well. Thanks a lot. Let's start with just you telling the listeners a little bit more about yourself, your background, and who the athletes that you have coached are, and so on.
Yeah. My personal sports experience and performance is much lower than those that I have the pleasure of working with in the sport now. So I used to be a elite swimmer when I was younger. And then when I was before I really got into the age of where you should go to Olympics and stuff like that, long time before that, I went education and went out working and so forth. And then in my life, I was skiing a lot, I was climbing a lot, I was going into high mountains. So I always loved outdoor sports and especially endurance outdoor sports. So at a certain time, my wife and me, we moved to Copenhagen to kind of like have, let's say, more normal jobs in corporate. And we started doing triathlon. We were like, okay, what sport are we going to do in a big town? Well, let's join the triathlon club. So this is like over 20 years ago that we started doing that. So we were riding, Ironman Austria with the three chain rings on the front and, funny looking helmets and stuff like that, and clip on the bars and stuff. So from that time, and we just loved it. We met people that were of same kind of values, that to get out, and even if it's raining, we ride and we swim in the ocean and stuff like that. So that's a little bit how I got into triathlon. Then I raced Ironman half was what I would like to race, like endurance. And at the same time, I worked in corporate. So I'm not, let's say I'm not from the line of that my wife, for instance, who has a master degree in sport and science. But I ended up coaching her, and she started to perform and went to Kona and performed and like that. And then some other people asked about how I did with her, and then I coached them. And then one time we were in Kona, I met Craig. We lived in the same hotel and we started to talk. And
Craig Alexander, for the listeners that might not know.
And with Craig, I kind of like, I had some clear ideas about coaching, but of course, not coming from the sports university and like that, I had a lot of read up on those things to do. But at the same time, I had been a let's say corporate coach where I worked, and education from more business and corporate coaching and stress coaching. And so I got into it from that side. And I think with Craig at that time, he was already world champion one time when I met him. So I met a guy who was a physical wonder. I mean, like, he was, for me, and still is, I admire what he did, how he trained. But I still had some ideas about training, but it was more, it was timing wise. It was very good for him to meet me and for me to meet him. It was just a good time because he probably needed somebody on the other aspects than just the physical training. And I was a good sounding board for him on that. And we talked about a lot of things, and our relation developed. And so let's say over 10 years, I have been, let's say, high performance advisor, mentor for him on some things. And that over those years, I could test some of my ideas, and we talked about running technique and like that. So when I would talk with him about my perspective of running efficiency, and he would say, listen, I've been through a lot, I know how to run, but what you're telling me sounds right, let's test it. And we did, and it would work and like that. Then it of course gave me confidence that, okay, you don't have to be from the sports university to have a view and an idea of things in this sport. And so he has been a profound advantage for me and helped me a lot, in the same way as I could bring things to the table for him that would help him a lot. So that was pure luck for me, and it has shaped me as the way I think and like that. So that relationship was of course important and has been fantastic for me.
And who are some of the other notable professional athletes that you are coaching or have coached other than Craig?
So I worked with I don't know, probably 20 professionals over my career, and I'm currently working with like 10 professional athletes. So before, I had the pleasure of working with Jens Pedersen Bach and Guilherme Minocchio, who both have won Ironman Copenhagen. Among others in the past, and winning Ironman Sweden and records and like. And this moment I'm now with Michelle Vesterby, that of course has been a lot with, and just had a baby and like that. And is Kona ready? Jesper Svensson, who was last year was second in Roth, and actually is a swim run world champion from Ø race and 2 times Ironman champion. I work with a Norwegian Hans Christian Tungesvik, who won Norseman last year, and then Sara Svensk, who last year won Barcelona and went so fast that she got the Nordic record on the Ironman distance. And with Craig and with some people in Brazil, I got involved in a project of a team in Brazil where I still work with Thiago Minhal from Brazil, and then I have been so lucky to meet Igor Amorelli down there, and we started working last year together. And then I have a few upcoming talents, Anders Christensen, Sebastian from Poland, Martine from Norway, and like that. So that's like, So yeah, I've been lucky to meet and have the trust of people who really had some dedication to what they were doing, and then could take it to for me, the highest level is when you win a race. Winning is not so easy in this sport. So I've been lucky to have people who could do that. Yeah.
And you also coach some age groupers, is that correct?
Yeah. I have some age groupers, and that changes a little bit over the years, but not a lot. Most of them I prefer if they actually stay with me. But we have a kind of agreement that when we get to the end of the season, if their goal for the next season is not, let's say, not ambitious, but just that if I feel that, listen, for this goal, you actually don't need my help, then I will tell them. And then I'll say, first of all, save the money. And second of all, let's stay friends. But there is I work best. And in my opinion, I see some coaches who has, maybe one good athlete, and then they fill up with a lot of age groupers. That's good from a business perspective, but it doesn't work for me. I had a time where I had more athletes. But if I sit and just do programs that somehow I like when it's a challenge. Of course, I don't like when it's very challenging, but it is sometimes. But when it is, I feel that I also, as a coach, develop. So that's why I try to keep it at a fairly low number. And I like when it's people who really want to, at a minimum, go for podiums where they race, not necessarily in Kona, but at least get to Kona or stuff like that, So that's when I feel that I'm at my best and that I really develop also, because I have to think about what I'm doing. I don't like to do repeat work and like that. So I try to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in some of our conversations that we've had before this interview, you've mentioned that you have kind of a list of several points beside just the physical training and skills training that are required for triathlon success. So can we go into that a little bit? Can you talk about a few of those important points and how to work on them and optimize them?
Yeah, I think it's in the beginning I had it as a rough kind of idea, and very much from corporate. When I worked in corporate, it was the same. I worked and my expertise was people, getting the maximum out of people. Because in corporate, if you're paying a person every month, what is the most important thing? The most important thing is to get the maximum out of what you're paying, and that is then a person. It can be the thinking, it can be how fast they are doing something or like that. But it's always about the person. And actually, when you help people to excel, that's actually also normally when they are happy. So people, they kind of like go like, oh, if the persons are happy, then we can get them to perform. No, a lot of people actually are very happy when they feel they perform and create value. So from that point of view, when I got more serious about triathlon, then I was like, and I saw that people would come to me and they would just talk about power and pulse and how do you train and like that. And I was like, that kind of like, in a way, sometimes becomes the simplest part. The hardest part is to find out what is most important for the person who comes to you. And there I developed this, especially with Craig. When I worked with Craig, that was some of the points that maybe he was not fulfilling totally or even missing to look at. So it has become we call it the DNA method, because it's totally individual. So it actually, DNA is 1 in 7 billions. You have your own DNA. So we call it DNA method, and it has 10 points. And that has over the year been a little bit, but the last 5 years has been like, this is it. These are the 10 points that define and interact in each other's on performance in triathlon, and actually in many things in life, to be honest. But so in the triathlon one, we start basically on the, of course, there is if it's a method, you start from one point, and the start point would always be, what is your goal? And from your goal springs the motivation. So that's one point, and it's a very big point. It's huge. And for instance, in goals and motivation, it's you can say that some people just, it's obvious, I want to get better and like this and that. Yeah, but from the goals, one test point could be how your goal, how inside driven or outside driven, for instance, is it? Does it means that how much does it come from within your desire to see how good can I be at a certain thing and like that, or how outside driven is acceptance from the club, or acceptance or admiration and things like that. And I meet athletes who I say, I don't care what other people think of me, and I go, sorry, we all care, because deep down from long time ago, when we were living in caves, we were depending on being accepted in a group. Else we would be pushed out of the cave and we would die. So deep down in our mind is acceptance in a group, and sometimes admiration, or how powerful we are in the group and like that. So it becomes, to a certain extent, on goals and motivation, it becomes, how dependent are you on? How much does it feel? Is it 10%? Are you 10% driven from outside, things, or are you 90% driven from outside? And I can tell you, when I work with my people, when I see that they are very out-driven, from being, admired or accepted or things like that, that's not going to carry you the last 15K down on the run on Queen K in Kona in 35 degrees. Then you're going to lose. So
what do you do if you have a situation where an athlete is very externally motivated like that, and you know that is a weakness? What is sort of a strategy that you can go about to increase that internal motivation?
There are several ways. One of them is that you see if you can change the goal to something that is deeply connected with your human values. That means in this sport, for instance, one athlete, for instance, would say that you would go like, so who do you admire? Okay, I admire this one. Why? Oh, this person has really high discipline, very dedicated to the sport, and like this and that. Okay, so that's a value for the person. Then you go and you check, is your goal actually aligned with those deep values in you? Because those values, they come from your home also. What were you brought up with and things like that. It can also be somebody says, I like that athlete because he takes chances. When he's racing, he takes chances and like that. Okay, why is that important to you? Well, because I'm from a family where my father took chances. He built up companies. He went bankrupt. He tried again. I think that's how people should be. Okay, if you think that's how people should be, that's how you should actually act as an athlete, because that's how you're going to be in your zone, because it's aligned with your values. So if I would then force a person whose values are like that to say, go safe, don't take chances, I would be counterproductive advising him of how to race. I should support it. I should support it to a certain extent that, hey, listen, just run 3 minutes per K on the Ironman, go, but he's going to blow. So you would then align his human values with his goals in the race or in training. Then you start to see people excel. So you try to find what is your human values, and then you see, is your goals aligned with that? And on the other side, you try, of course, to get away from all the stupid social media goals and like that, that people, they are addicted to the likes and you try to explain them and show them that the likes are not going to change your life. Yeah, they're going to give you a little more sponsor money if you have a lot, but when you're running out there, there's nobody pressing like. It's you and your body and what you have trained, So you try to open the eyes that the superficial things doesn't have that big value, and you try to align the true goals with their true values. And if you can get that a little bit turned, then you, as a coach, in my opinion, has done your job. You cannot totally just fix it, but you can at least have the discussion and have the talk, and then open the eyes for the connections.
Yeah, that's a great example. So what are some of the other points other than the goals and the motivation?
as it goes down, in 10 points, the next one would be, the first two here a little bit. They can maybe be a little bit, people that go, can we talk about power soon, but the next one would be, it's called unique, and that relates to that every person, when you put a goal every year, is in a unique position. That means you are different than you were 6 months ago, and in 6 months from that point, you will be different. We change, time change. You just have to look at your watch, and it changes every second. So nothing stands still, not even the person. So in unique, we go in and say, okay, if this is the goal, where are we now then? What is your strength according to your goal? What is your weakness? What is the threats and what is the opportunities this year, And that changes. And if you have that conversation and analyze it correctly, then there are some things that you can say, whoa, I need to take care of this. I have to be aware of this, and I have to grab that chance. And and that's something I see with the professionals, that somehow they think that repeating and I just develop a little bit. Yeah, but the things around you, they change. So the first step is to find the goal. The next thing is to say, okay, what are the unique circumstances for exactly you here and now for this season? And then you move on. And then you move into like time, just plan. That's normal, season planning. But to be a little bit more maybe critical and say, what are we spending our time on now? Okay, what do you want to spend more time on, and what do you want to spend less time on? Because nobody's sitting and watching the wall for 1 hour a day. Nobody. Everybody is filling up their time with something. The question is, what do you fill up your time with? And some people, unfortunately, fill up their time with things that is not productive towards their goal. And so as a coach, I try to get those things away. Like say, this is not productive for anything. Stop doing it.
Can you give some examples of common issues that you have that you see athletes do waste their time on, essentially?
This is the easiest thing is your phone. I mean, that's just the easiest thing to say. I mean, there are other things, but I mean, the most obvious to anybody in the world right now is your phone. That is slowly starting to be a full attachment of people's hand. You can operate it into some people's hands. They just can't bite them. That would be a problem. But of course, spending time on the phone. You could say it in this way: stop following others, start following your dream. That would be one way of saying it. And some would say, no, it's good for me to know what all the others are doing. Well, is it? What do you get out of it? Does it actually propel you towards your goal? All these social media that we are spending time on that are addictive, and we know they're addictive and all this. So I won't go down that road because there's a lot of other experts, but I think everybody now should understand that. And the worst is when I have an athlete who says, no, I got this. And I go like, no, you don't. Because behind these Facebook, Instagram, there are people that they have hired from Las Vegas who made people gambling addicted. They are now working in Silicon Valley for Facebook and Instagram to make you addicted to spend as much time on their fucking things as possible. Sorry, my language. But so the first step in this is to understand that you are being manipulated to spend time on it. Okay, how can I then do what I need to do there and see what I think is nice to see and then get away from there? So that would be one way of wasting your time and then correcting it. Very important in my opinion at the moment. So, to work with that, for instance.
Yeah, and does time also apply to, let's say, things that some athletes are doing in training, but that would not be the most productive use of that time? So, I don't know, let's say if you have an athlete that come to you and they're doing 6 hours per week in the gym, for many athletes that might be excessive. Do you have that sort of assessment of time as well? Like where does your training time go, not just the time outside of training?
I mean, I have to say I'm probably more focused on the time outside, because the time inside the training is planned. I will put that, okay, we are doing run strength for 45 minutes. We're doing this for that. And sometimes the athlete comes and say, hey, Frank, it only takes me half an hour to do these 3 times this and like this and that, and I'll go like, well, it's not so much the time, it's more that you get through this sequence of movements and strength just after the run and like that. So yeah, I look more at the things what they do outside of training, because training is pretty much set that, okay, today we have a 5-hour ride or we have a 2-hour this and like that, So if they don't follow the training, then of course comes the thing that, why didn't you go 5 hours? Why did you only go 3.5? But that has many times to do with, well, I was tired, or did you drink enough? I didn't sleep well last night, or things like that, So no, on time, it's pretty much, what do you spend our time on? And then the other line is, okay, how do I build my season? When am I training? When am I high training load? When am I camp? Which races, taper, all these. Periodization is time planning, and then on the other side is how do we spend our time? Those two lines in time. Yeah. So but then moving on. We can move fast through another. What the next one is equipment. So when we have the goal, we have the circumstances, we have time planning and where we spend our time. Then we move into equipment and we say, okay, what is the status of equipment? Which sponsors do we have? What bikes do we have this year? Which tires are we using? What's the helmet? Do we have a new helmet sponsor? Okay, then we have to test which helmets are good for what. Blah, blah. So, you go through the whole setup of equipment and see if there are improvement things or adaptation things. For the pros, you can have adaptation things, meaning that, well, I have this helmet sponsor, so I have to use these helmets, You cannot freely just choose. And of course, the last year there's been a lot on equipment with the running shoes, like with the Nike and all this stuff. So, yeah. So for instance, on the running shoes, then we would actually concretely go out and buy the Nike. We go to a track and we do a test. So we see what is the difference for you. If you run in the shoes you're normally running in, if you run in the Nike, is there a difference? What difference is there? So instead of listening to all the this and this and this, we go into each person and say, okay, what does it mean for you, on equipment? So, yeah.
And is that something that the pros can do a lot? I mean, some of them don't have a lot of income really unless they are at the top of the game. So how do you do in circumstances where it might not be an option? Okay, shoes, maybe this is a big enough issue that the pros might be able to do that, but something else like going out and buying multiple different bike helmets might be a bit of something that might not even be available. How do you tackle those challenges?
Because I work with different pros, then of course I can transfer knowledge from one to the other, without even revealing secrets between the pros, because I try to respect, if they want to share knowledge between them, they are free to do that. I don't share it unless I know it's permitted. But of course, if I know that one new helmet has come on the market and it's very ventilated compared to how aero it also is, then of course we would probably go for that one if we think that it's also fitting the body position and like that. So there is some transfer of information of working with several. What else? I think, it's more to be informed instead of reading, instead of guessing. It's more to take and say, okay, what does it mean for me? Get down to the person, because in that way you just have a better conversation. So if somebody is sponsored by New Balance and says that, oh, those guys in the Nikes, they're running faster than me. Okay, well, then let's test it. Let's test what it exactly is. Then we know if it's 2 seconds or 5 seconds per K. What is it, So if we then find out, oh, it's 20 seconds per K, then okay, then we have a problem, Then they have to go to the sponsor and say, are you coming with a shoe that's, with the new things and like that? And then you start working. So it's a progression, but at least you get in on a personal level and address the circumstances, If you just take the general information out there and apply it to a person, then it doesn't become personal, does it? So with the wetsuits, the wetsuits, you can take all the best wetsuits, the top line of all wetsuit brands. And if we say there are 10, then 5 of the wetsuits would fit for one athlete and 5 of them would not. Even if the best one, best material, they are not put together in the same shape, So if somebody swims suddenly faster because they have a new brand, then we know, oh, there's something wrong, and then we have to find out what it is. So
yeah. And you mentioned there that for the pros, they can to some extent adapt to certain things, but for the age groupers, it's more about finding an improvement. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean, for somebody who's not sponsored, you have the choice. There you need to just inform yourself and test if you can before you make the choice. That's the best way,
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So the difference there being that you're not constrained by sponsorship contracts. So of course you have to pay for the stuff. That's the disadvantage. But
and then some people, they go, well, I can get this in half price, so I'm going to go with that. Then if you go like, okay, I take this wetsuit, but it doesn't fit you, so you're going to lose 1 minute on an Ironman race. Good. Just, that to save 200 euros, you're going to go 1 minute slower. Then you can make that decision. but at least get to a point where it's an informed decision. That's how we try to work. We try to work with informed decisions instead of guessing, So I think that's more the point in equipment.
Perfect. And then the next point after equipment.
Yeah, then it's food, and I think we can just take it and say, well, that's one of the topics, nutrition, food, daily food, and training nutrition and race nutrition. That's the 3 parts, which is a topic that is, it's endless. So I don't know. Yeah.
Do you want to give like a 1, 2, or 3 sentence summary of some of the main things around nutrition that you think are important?
There's so many details. It's my wife she's certified sports nutrition expert who works with my athletes on these things. So, and I follow it closely, So we have our philosophies and our opinions, and then we try to see what's coming up. So I'm not a guy who says that, you just have to do this and this. It's always work. No, there are so many new things coming that it's really, you need to stay up to date, and then you need to filter it. Then you have to go like, what is commercial and what could actually benefit. So, okay, so you can say a couple of things that it could be new to look at and like that. And I know that. So already some years ago, we started looking at, for instance, the sodium use. Kaiser worked together with the English guys, the Precision Hydration. We bought the test equipment. So we actually went from, well, let's take this and this, let's measure how much do you lose, how much sweat do you lose, and then okay, in this environment, in this temperature, in this humidity, at this intensity, you lose this much. Okay, and to try to start to build records on the athletes slowly, that when you get to one place where it's 20 degrees and humidity 50 and it's Ironman race, how much sodium should I take per hour? Okay, again, getting from I know now, getting to really informed decisions, and that sometimes takes work that takes a long time, so, and equipment and testing and like that. So that would be one thing, for instance, we started. Now the last years, we have looked a lot at working on the body's pH level, which is one of the key components of homeostasis in the body. And it sounds a little bit but basically it is to keep your body in balance as you are smashing it. Because doing a full Ironman you are smashing yourself. So what can we do to help the body? Well, we can try to keep it in balance, which is inside the body is called homeostasis level, to balance it out. And one of the things that we are really moving is the pH level. So many knows what the pH level is in your hair, because the shampoo commercials, they tell you, but in your body it's 7.4, and you want to try to. And hard physical exercise is acid. A lot of the food we eat today is acid. So you want to help your body, by putting things that are, balancing it out. Instead of being acids, it's alkaline. And that you can do in your training, and you can do it in the racing also. So we tried to start to look a lot at that some years ago, and are working constantly on trying to look at these things,
And do you, on that note, do you have an opinion on something that is pretty trendy right now? Is the Amp-Human lotion, which I think the proposed mechanism is that it of buffers the acid level in the body, so makes it less acidic. Yeah,
what I've seen is I have only have access to what they have shown, so you always have to filter it through that you respect that anybody who runs a company are trying to be ethically correct. And then they also, of course, has a purpose of telling you these things. So from what they have shown, there is some, I wouldn't say buffer, I would say that it helps, buffer is like really moving it. But we are very positive to anything that moves a little or a lot or like that. I'm always looking on these things like, are we neutral or positive? Is it a zero or benefit? As long as we are sure it doesn't have a negative impact, Even on zero, it can have a placebo effect. So, then, okay, let's try it, So it's so new that it's difficult a little bit to be sure. So I have some who's using it, and they say they feel that it's helping them. So, yeah. Yeah.
So the next point then on the list after...
Well, then it's then we actually get to physical training and skills finally,
right.
you know. So we can talk on that point if
Yeah, so can you kind of discuss a little bit around your overall philosophy on that physical training side?
Well, if we take a total step back, then I have a lot of, but one thing that in my thing is clear is that we're talking about endurance sport. For some, it becomes a headline and then they just go into the training. For me, the word endurance means a lot of implications. So if we look, where do we have our knowledge from and where does it come from? For me, coming not from a sports university, but trying to catch up and reading like crazy and talking to a lot of nice people who would help me in the beginning, I kind of like said, okay, so when I'm trying to catch up on all this knowledge, I want to pick the right knowledge. And what I saw was that, in my opinion, a lot of the knowledge to a certain extent there are some filters for me. So first of all, in the Olympics, the longest event is the marathon. That is the third discipline in an Ironman. So the longest events at the Olympics, the parade, at the end of the Olympics, we do the marathon because it's so long. Well, I am not a Olympic distance coach, I have to say, specify. I am a half and full distance specialist. So that means that what I work with, our shortest distance is 3 hours and 30 minutes. And that's the men. So that's already like an hour or more longer than the longest Olympic distance. And a lot of research and like that has come into the sports together with the Olympic event, because it became a political statement for the countries of how developed was a country, which I guess Hitler was one of the first who tried to use the Olympics as propaganda. But since then, Russia and US, and then later China. And so there is a kind of like, the more medals you can take at the Olympics, the more developed your country is, kind of like, not I don't say it in a bad way, but it is a little bit there. So that means that a lot of research and money was put into anything that has to do with the Olympics. And from that, a lot of course, scientific articles and books and like this comes out from that. So you have to trace I trace my knowledge from where does it come from and try to filter it. So I filter it through that, well, a lot of this is not necessarily endurance sport, what they're talking about. And then second of all, there are two shifts, in my opinion, that in the 30s, they started to learn how to measure VO2 max. So a lot of training methods was based on VO2 max, all the way until coming into the 70s, when you could then you started measuring whatever people want to call maximum lactate steady state or anaerobic threshold or whatever we want to call it. And then from the 70s on, a lot of training books and articles were made based on that, So my ideas are a little bit filtered through that. Okay, is this based on this or is it based on that, on like that? So I try not to just copy things into my head. I try to say, what is this actually meant for, and what use does it have in endurance sport? Because I think endurance sport is especially Ironman, is pretty solid, different from a lot of things. Then there are some basic physical things, but they are pretty basic. So So in my opinion, my philosophy is there is nothing that fits all. I worked at a certain time with two athletes, and they moved on at the same time, and one of them continued the career and one stagnated totally. And why? Because they were both introduced into the same training system. One was ready for it and one was not. And unfortunately, I already knew that when they moved, and I was like, this is not good for one of them. So when a person comes to me, I think that at a certain point, a coach has to, if you have a coaching philosophy, it has to be that you have to have different methods, and you have to find out what method to apply to that person at that time. That is my basic core philosophy. One example could be the 80-20 philosophy. 80% is at zone 2 or 1 or 2, whatever you call it, and 20% then has to be threshold or VO2, whatever. That's the 80-20 method. I know for a fact that this method is fantastic, but I know for a fact that it doesn't apply. It is not the right one to apply to every person at that certain time in their development. It's just not. This is a fact. So the people who goes out and says, I have the right method, for me, they're deadly wrong, unfortunately. I don't want to discuss with them. I think it's fine. That's their opinion, but it's absolutely not my opinion. My opinion is you have to really analyze the person. Where are they? What do they need now to move to their next level? Then if a person, I don't apply the 80-20 method to that person, maybe 2 years later, I need to apply it. And that's why every year you have to reassess and really reassess a person. So first analyze, where are we now? Where do we want to go? What do we do now then? And then every year you have to make that assessment. So that's basically my philosophy on the physical training. Then I work with testing. But when we do tests in different labs around, different people test the people I work with, I am very critical. They have to be tested right. If they're not right, and you get a number, and then you start calculating percentage numbers from that number, and the first number is wrong, then you are just going the wrong way. So,
what are some of the mistakes that happen in lab testing? Some of the maybe incorrect protocols that usually used that can potentially mislead people?
There is one basic one where they go and get tested. That is that if you're testing a person on a bike, for instance, it has to be the person's own bike. You cannot put a person in Scandinavia, for instance. It's very popular to have these Monarch bikes because they were the first with power meter, and they're very correct. But it doesn't matter. You cannot put a person on a different saddle in a little bit different position and then tell them, now I want you to do your maximum. And then after, you're actually even going to tell the efficiency of the person. It just doesn't make sense. And I've seen people, in really, really good people, taking a person in and wanting to test them on the bike on steps in a room that's, let's say, 25 degrees. They open the window a little bit, and then it's like, and we know that inside the brain there is one thing that's going to shut down the muscles, and that's the central governor system, if you believe in that, So when the core temperature is rising, then you are not going to, you cannot do your maximum. That's impossible, And the way you cool down is that air flows over your skin and makes your sweat evaporate, and that evaporation creates a cooling effect into your blood that goes back to the core. Now, if you don't have air moving in a room, then at a certain time, your core temperature is going to start rising so fast that your brain is going to start shutting down muscle fibers. And you want to perform a maximum test on that. That's impossible. That is just nonsense. And I have seen it. So that's why I'm quite critical on that. That's one of the ones where I'm quite like, okay, you want to test one of my athletes, then talk to me first. And I want that you do it proper on the bike with this and this and this, So then we have these masks and like that, and it's fantastic. But also people are testing running on a treadmill. Now, if you want to tell me that a treadmill is exactly like running outside, no, it's not. We know that. But because we, in general, don't have the equipment to test outside, you have one that's called the K5 from Cosmet. But it's very expensive. It's like 25,000-30,000 euro for that equipment, So people then put people on treadmills and they test them there. And then they are then going to say your threshold run pace is this. First of all, who knows that the treadmill is calibrated correct? Okay. Second of all, running on a surface that moves under your foot is not the same as running on a surface standing still. Okay. For some people, it's harder to run on a treadmill. And for most people, it's easier running on a treadmill. What have people then done? It's actually known as a common thing to raise the treadmill 1%. And that's where I totally jump off the wagon. I go like, okay, stop. If you're going to raise to compensate for the speed of something moving under you, you're going to angle your surface 1% uphill. That means you're changing the angle in your foot. That means you're putting more strain on your calf and your Achilles. It means you're changing everything. It's just, and you're going to do a maximum test on that. So, so in general, I allow testing to be done, and then I filter it through that, simply. I just, and I'm trying not to be arrogant here. It's not, I don't want to come across arrogant, but I just think, we have to sometimes just, better to, I prefer my athlete goes and do a 10K run race, and then we take it from there, then we see. Then we don't get the lactate number and the metabolic numbers and like that, but at least I know what the real run pace is at the moment. If the person said, I had a good day, I felt well, and I gave it all and I paced it right, then I know, okay, this is where we are. So, running on track and taking lactate is actually for me one of the best run tests of them all. That's what I prefer. So,
yeah, I was going to ask about that as well. If you like that version,
yeah, absolutely. It's less. I really like to get the metabolic numbers like fat burning and like that, but they have to be done right. When they're done right, I really am happy when a sports scientist or some really dedicated person has the good equipment, does it right. I'm so grateful. But when they do it wrong, I get quite upset, to be honest. So yeah, but that's how. Yeah. Yes. Now I got carried away.
No, that's fine. I have a follow-up on the 80-20 because that's something that obviously has been a lot in all over triathlon endurance sports media in recent years. Yeah. What are some examples of situations where you think it does not apply? So you said that there are some situations where it's the wrong choice, and can you just give some examples to give the listeners an idea of how it's not a one size fits all, just some context where you would do something else, whether it's something more intensity or less intensity or whatever it is?
I have one very good example, and that is that I worked for 1 year with a very nice guy called Martin Toft. He's a bike rider, so sometimes I maybe just go in and have a one-on-one analyze on bike riders' performance and like that. And sometimes for him, we worked on a project for over 1 year. So let's say I was not his coach. I didn't make his week-to-week programs, but I was his high-performance advisor in the project. And that was to beat the hour record, which at that time was Bradley Wiggins. So it was a pretty high aim. And we almost did. So he got the second fastest time in the world when we tried. We didn't break Wiggins, which is but he got the second fast, and he did the Danish record and like that. So a fantastic project, fantastic person. So in that, the hour record is simply that you in a velodrome are going for 1 hour, and the distance then is measured. There are some very specific rules of what is allowed, not allowed. So you work within a framework. And of course, aerodynamics is a huge factor. So we worked in the velodrome a lot, testing. Training-wise, we worked and talked about things. And he was, for instance, one guy that in bicycling at that time, and many would advise, 80-20. And we talked about it, which approach and like that. And one of my things with him was that you have this. One thing you're missing is absolute power, like the just strong power, just top end power, to keep for a long time like that. And he said that, listen, I tried to train 80-20, very restrictive, really like just doing that. And his performance goes down. So when we talked about what to do, he had a full-time job. So he biked to work and from work. It sounds crazy that the second fastest guy in the world did that, but he did. So in that, we incorporated a lot of, let's say, sweet spot training, actually. We did other things also, but we were absolutely outside of the 80-20, totally. Because he said from the beginning, I have tried it. It fails every time. Every time I do this, my performance is going down. So that was very simple in that way. Then for instance, we put to the gym a lot to get more absolute power. So we simply went away from the bike because he was a bike rider. He's been riding all his life. And I said, if we want to do any adaptation in 6 months' time, we have to do something that you haven't done, that he hadn't been in the gym for a long time. So, and there we got the biggest benefit. So it's again, you go in and you say, okay, what have you done before? What are we going to spend our time on? We have X amount of time. What are we going to put in as a new component? Where can you get the best benefit for the investment of energy and time? Okay, so gym was really a huge factor in that one. And he was dedicated, and he did it, and going through hell, basically sometimes, because when you go in the gym and you haven't done it before, it affects so much your feeling when you're riding. You have many times where your riding is really bad because you're very tired sometimes, and muscular tired, so it mentally is a very hard thing to get through, and he did it. So, it was a big pleasure, but there absolutely, it was a good example of 80-20, no go, not at all. Didn't work. So,
do you think that it might have been because in his case he was a very experienced athlete with a lot of a really strong background, had built up a very strong base, if you want to call it that, but he was also time limited, so he had sort of the capacity to do a lot of higher intensity, even though he wasn't super high, but higher than the 80-20 low intensity, and because he had that base, but he didn't have a full time. doing cycling wasn't a full-time job for him, so he didn't do it for maybe 35 hours per week, so he couldn't destroy himself either. Well, do you think that might be why it worked so well?
It could be, but again, absolutely, it can be. I try always be too very open and like that, and then we just spend enough time before you make the decision and saying go. Then when you make the decision, you have to commit. You have to really go for it and say, okay, we're going to do it this way. But I've seen also, and that's especially one of the things that happens for me when I have young talents coming and like that they go like, because I know what it takes in an Ironman. I know what power you need. If we say that, okay, let's say the aerodynamics has a CDR of 0.200. Good. Let's say that's the norm. Okay. How much power do you actually have to be able to go with if you're not a drafter? Okay. Let's say it's actually a person like most luckily are racing fair. What power do you need to be able to keep over 4 hours and 30 minutes or whatever it's going to be, on a flat race course? Then when you go into a hilly race course, okay, then you have to have absolute power. Then there's a bigger variation, but it can't be if you do Ironman Wales, then on the rolling hills, on the climbs, then you have to get up to threshold every time. Then you're going to be done when you're running like that. So you have to have a good feel of what numbers should you be able to do. Good. So for instance, a guy like Hans Christian who won Norseman last year. Norseman is 3,000 meters of climbing on the bike in total. It's up and down basically all the way. And after that, you run 24K flat, and then you run up a bloody mountain at the end, really. So there you really have to know what power am I going to do on the climbs that is not going to kill my legs after, because you're not running flat. You're 24K flat and then up a mountain. And running up, if your legs are done, they're done. You're not moving. So there you go in. And I said, he came and I said, okay, I want to win Norseman. Okay, this is going to be a 2-year plan. You're too far. Your numbers are too far now. We cannot accelerate your progress that fast that next year it's a factor. Okay, he trained, he went Norseman, he went fine. And the year after I said, okay, the progression line looks fine. Let's push for it. Let's go, And we did. And okay, then you say he won the last 200 meters. So he could have been second or third. Winning is so difficult. So the point is not that he won. The point is that how long time does it take to develop? And if we had used, to get to the point, the 80-20 method with him, he would never have won. Why? Because he was too young. He was not resistant enough. He was not strong enough. You need some basic strength. Now that strength, that core basic strength on the bike, if you use 80-20 or you use a lot of sweet spot, that's two different approaches. With him, we needed to build strength first. A lot of biking and a lot of... So if you're biking a lot, like 80% of yours is zone 1 and 2, that is the aerobic system that you're training more than your strength. There's no doubt about that. So that means you are really improving your aerobic, you're building mitochondria, you're all this and like that. But you're going to lack the strength of biking 3,000 meters in a race. You're not building that strength. So he did a lot of that kind of sweet spot training, a lot like that. Then at a certain time, you have to change it. You can't keep doing that. Then you're missing out on the other benefits. So that's the point, is that you have to analyze the athlete and you have to see, so what's your threshold? Okay. And there are some people also missing the point, is that they're doing a 20-minute threshold and then they're evaluating the athlete like that. That doesn't work. We are endurance sport. I'm more interested in go and ride 3 hours with a good pressure, steady pace, hit these numbers. And then on the 4th hour, I want to see what you can do. I want to see what is your lactate when you are doing what you think is supposed to be your Ironman power in hour 4 and hour 5. Okay. Because that tells me the endurance. 20 minutes test doesn't tell me any endurance. It tells me your threshold. It's super important, but it's not the only factor, especially in Ironman racing. So, yeah, okay, yeah. Now I got carried away again. Was it answer to the question?
No, it does. No, yeah. It does. It gives another example, another great example, So that's all good. Mm-hmm. And can we get into some common mistakes, perhaps that you see on one side professionals, but on the other side perhaps amateurs make when it comes to any of the points that we have talked about, whether it's the physical training or something else that you want to mention? Just some common mistakes that are quite common and that we can help people not make.
Yeah. I mean, if we split it up in age groupers and pros, I think on age groupers, not so much mistakes, more that I would say that age groupers, when you're time limited, then you have to be very careful about your consistency. The pros also, in my opinion, should be, but that's a classic thing to say, consistency is key. Well, it is actually. And when you go down to a person who puts in 8 to 15 hours compared to, let's say, 15 to 30, 40 hours, consistency becomes a bigger factor, because that foundation of aerobic fitness you have are a little more fragile on an age grouper than it is on a pro, because they have some bigger blocks at a bigger certain amount of volume at times, which gives that foundation is more solid. So that means, if you say a good advice to age group would be consistency. That means avoid injuries and avoid sickness. That's the two things. Whatever your job will demand of you, it's demanding. Whatever your wife is demanding or your boyfriend is demanding, they are demanding, especially the wife. So, in that way, that's just my key advice for an age grouper, is that there is not any run interval or anything that is worth getting injured about. For if your goal is your race result, that's not. For the fun of running with guys or racing them on the bike, there's a lot of fun in that, and I applaud that. I love it when they go in training, just going at it, racing friends. It's fantastic. But for the race performance, it's not always productive. Consistency is productive for age group, in my opinion, for sure. On let's say on mistakes, I would say, well, on the equipment side of mistakes, I would say that there's a tendency, for some more than others, but there's a tendency that we get more and more depending on the watches and on the data. Really, I sometimes experience people looking at their training peaks and then telling me I'm tired. Yeah, well, I knew you were going to say it, because your training peaks has a high chronic training load or acute or whatever. So some people are actually reacting to what the numbers are saying more than they're feeling now. That's very dangerous. They should feel more. So when you go and run a 2-hour run, that if you have a normal route that you're running, it actually is very healthy to leave the phone and the watch home. You don't have to come home and know what was your average pace. If it's just an easy long 2-hour run, you don't have to. You can just enjoy running, and it will actually liberate your mind a little bit. So I'm use the tools, but they are overused sometimes. The best example for me is when you see a lot of people who swimming in the pool, and when they start, when they push off, they have to press the watch, and then when they come in, instead of just touching the end and moving to the side so other people can turn or get in, they actually have to press their watch, and then they have to, through the swim goggles, they start looking at their watch, and they're standing in the middle of the lane, of the swim lane. I'm like, come on, just leave your watches. It's swimming. This session is 3,300 meters. You can put it manually into your things after. You don't have to have everything on your watch, especially in swimming. It's quite, it's actually unethical to swim in that way. So, I try to say, let's feel our bodies and relax a little bit sometimes. I think that could be good.
On the professional side?
I think on the professional side, I think at the moment, I'm always a little careful when I'm there, because people are very individual on the professional side. I would say that it's actually one thing that I have on the it's one of the 10 points. It's called peak performance, and under peak performance is under every point of these 10 points we have underlying points, and one of the underlying points is the team that you surround yourself with, and I try myself with those I work with to kind of really be open and clear with the guys and girls. But I think that some pros they get the key players right many times, and I think that's fantastic. But I think every year you should sit down and say, okay, what's my goal? Who is important for me in that goal? Who's going to be on my team this year? And hopefully those that you already have, they're the same. That means it has gone well. But I think it's important to say who's going to be on my team. What is the function of that person? Are they capable of that function that I want from them? Do they have the capacity here and now? Do I think they actually have time to give that to me now? Because it's not just me as a coach. It's like a physiotherapist. It's like the wife or the boyfriend. It can be anything. Anybody that you say, this person has an important function for me this season to reach my goal. Good. And at the end, if you think that, okay, this is the good person, this is what I want from him, this is the capacity he has to have, time-wise also, then at the end, sit down with the person and say, listen, my friend, I have this goal this year. You're very important to me. I really would like you to help me with this. At certain times, it's going to be nothing, but at certain times here and here, I think I will need you a lot, either with me or even to be able to talk every day on Skype or something. Can you do that? Will you do that? Then you are aligned. Then you are like, kind of like, and I think some people, they miss that. I think they just take it for granted, not in a negative way, but just the things just keep flowing. And then suddenly during the season, one person is asked to do something and they can't do it. And then you get in the middle of a hard training block, you get problems. And that's not where you want it. Or even worse, leading into the most important race, you get problems because you didn't ask that person. You didn't say, this is what I want from you. Can you give me that? And you didn't get the okay. You just take it for granted because, well, last year I did. Well, maybe this year is different. Maybe that person has changed. Maybe things has changed, So I think the pros sometimes need to organize their team and ask them, are you within this? And then sometimes there is another thing, and that is there are some people they should take out of their team, and they don't. And then they end up being frustrated during the season, and that frustration takes too much energy. You have to take that talk sometimes. You have to go like, listen, you've been my nutrition advisor, but I have had stomach problems in 2 races and it's just not functioning. So I need to find another. I'm really happy and like that, but I have to move to somebody else, and then you have to do that. So aligning with those who are important and then taking out those, either that it doesn't work or that I even see some people coming to me and say, oh, this, and that. I'm like, dude, this is not good. This is negative energy, just get rid of it. Why are you? Yeah, well, I can't. It's a good friend. Yeah, but just the person has to get away when you are racing. It's not working. So that's what I think some pros could improve on. Everybody can improve on.
That's a very, very interesting and insightful point. Definitely. Yeah. And one question about the transition from age grouper to pro. You've done that with a lot of athletes that you've coached. So can you talk a little bit about what an athlete that is racing age group or is just getting into professional racing from age group racing, some of the things that they need to consider when it comes to taking that step?
I mean, in general, I think that they have to commit. When you're trying to half commit, then you're not going to move fast enough. You will be beaten by those who are committing fully. So you need to be able to commit. Time-wise, dedication-wise, and like that. That's my advice to those that comes to me. And I really am very hard and saying that, can you commit? Can you really, do you want to commit? Can you financially commit? Can you time-wise commit? Can you, and then you move on to the physical part, and then you have to be honest as a coach and saying, okay, this is where you are. This is what you can expect in 1 year and 2 years of progression. You can't just, if we push it too hard, you'll get injured and you just lose your career. But can they commit, and then I think, one way of thinking about it that I always say is that you have to look at this as a job. As much as it's romantic to be a professional sports person, the more you do it, there is going to be times when you have to do things that is not nice. That's in any job, So look at it as a job and try to put a time of 40 hours a week that you need to do this, because the alternative for them, if they're not doing it, is to go on the working market. And if you go on the working market, you need to work most European places like 40 hours to make a decent living. So I'm like, put 40 hours in your head and then see if you financially can make it the first couple of years before you get good results and sponsors. These are the 2 hardest things. I think it's very hard financially in this sport.
So do you think that it's possible to combine committing with having some sort of part-time job to make the finances go about, or do you actually need to have a significant amount of savings that you use to actually really be a full-time athlete and not have a job to worry about?
I think that's so individual. Because it's a question of temperament. That there are some people that if they have savings, if they're using them, like just spending them like that, then that will stress them. That will be like, I should be able. My savings should always be zero or going up. Do you understand what I mean? That's like. Yeah. So yeah. If you're that kind of person, then you have to keep your savings and then get a part-time job. Whereas if somebody says, no, I have saved the money exactly for this for 2 years, I'm going to burn them on this, then that's fine, So that's quite individual, I think, on that. And so there you should really feel, who am I? What am I going to be good with? Because you don't need that stress as you're really pressing your body in training and racing to new heights. You need to be in balance. So you gotta feel and like that, how you are. And I think also when you choose a job, if you take a part-time job, you got to choose a job. I mean, a lot of the young ones, they go like, they get one good result and then they start coaching. It's like, well, if you're 25 and you start coaching, what do you have to give? Like, is it actually your training methodology you're giving, or is it mine or somebody else's? And is it just to make money? And I think that's because that's the business I'm in. I don't like when people are coaching just to make a living, just to get the money. If you take somebody else's sports dreams and you say, I will put them in my hands and I'll take care of them, then you have to do it with the intent of, I want to help you reach a fantastic performance in a race and in your life. It sounds very Mother Teresa, but I think that should be the base of coaching other people. That should be the person. It shouldn't be that I need money, so I'm going to coach. That's just not.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not just a transaction. It's also a relationship. So you need to have the investment from both parties in it.
So that's my advice to some athletes, because they get asked, "Oh, you won that race? Can you coach me?" And like that. And I say to them, don't take 10. That's first of all a lot of stress from the beginning. So take 2 and 3 and feel if you feel you add value, and if you're good at it, then do more maybe. But don't take 5 just because you can get their money. So that's always my advice. And some of them will coach, and they will maybe even after 1 year they're better coaches than me. Fine, cool, but not do it for the money. Do it because you want to give somebody a person a maximum help that they can reach something they want in their life. So that it's very individual on that one. To get to the point is that there they have to be careful, and anybody advising them have to be careful to really let the people be individual. Some people get stressed of one thing, some people get stressed of another thing, and that's the most important. Don't put you they should not put themselves in a situation where they are stressing about things. That's not good for performance. It's just not.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just have one more question, and it's actually going back to following up on what we discussed with regard to the long distance training versus the research being done on Olympic sports.
Yeah.
And can you give an example of where perhaps there might be a discrepancy between what we might find if we just rely on that sort of scientific evidence based on mostly Olympic sports versus what you actually think tends to work better for long distance triathlon? And it might be a difficult question to answer, but
no, I think I will more leave it up than say that anybody hearing my answer now, this is my opinion. Okay, what is my opinion? It comes from who I talk with, what studies I read, and at the end, my decision on what I want to believe. So here's what I believe. I read one study and talked with one person who told me. I've read many studies and talked many. Recently, one made best sense to me because it aligns with most things that I have seen and been told by people that sometimes I talk with a person that I go like, well, that was maybe not so. But then sometimes I meet fantastic people, and sometimes they actually share their knowledge, and I'm grateful. So one person shared the knowledge with me and saying that, Frank, there is a lot of talk about intensity. There is a lot of talk about volume. There's a lot about old school, new school, whatever. I studied these things. I studied the mitochondria.
Mitochondria.
Yeah, so they are the let's say the powerhouse of the muscle. That's where oxygen goes in together with some kind of energy source, fat, carbohydrates, whatever, and is turned into ATP and so forth. So that's where we develop to move. Now they are very interesting because we want them to be better. And how are they better? They are better in two ways. Either by training, they multiply. That means they become more of them. So more of powerhouses attached to your muscle fibers, and meaning that more to take in oxygen and energy to make you move faster or longer. Or they grow in size. That's the two ways that mitochondria, they improve. Now, this person, he said to me what I believed already, and so he just confirmed. And he said to me, now I studied it so much. It's a very complicated thing to study. I'm still convinced from all the results I see that you can really make a huge adaptation to these mitochondria in two ways, either by long aerobic training or by shorter and harder. But what I am seeing is that shorter and harder will make them grow more in size and multiply also, whereas long aerobic will make them multiply more and grow in size secondarily. And in his opinion, for endurance sport, the multiplying is more important than the size of the mitochondria. So that I was talking slow to try and do it right. In total, he said to me, it's beneficial to do short intensity things for endurance athletes. It's beneficial to do long volume and aerobic training. I believe still that it's more, if you have to choose, you got to go for the volume and the long. So, yeah. And then and I hope it answers. And that's then where I still am. I am not replacing. At some times of the periodization that I do with my athletes, I will replace long with shorter and harder and gym and whatever. But that's the periodization question. You, in my opinion, to do a good Ironman, a part of your periodization period needs to have volume. When and where, that's the art of coaching. But it needs. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I actually thought that you might go in that direction with your answer, because a lot of research is on that high intensity training. And partially, as you say, because of the Olympic sports, I think also another factor there is that it's simply much easier to study high intensity than it is to study big volume, because you would need a much longer period maybe to see the changes. Yeah. So it's kind of an easier research project to study 6 weeks of high intensity interval training. Yeah. But that's a great example that totally answers the question. Yeah. So let's go into the rapid fire questions here. Just one sentence for these. And the first one is, what's your favorite book, blog, or resource related to endurance sports?
It has to be From Good to Great, which is actually a corporate book. That's From Good to Great. And it is simply because it has shaped my mind to understand that if you want great results, it can be a long process and you need to be very consistent. So I carried that from corporate into when I changed to sports performance. So.
Yeah, great. And what's your favorite piece of gear or equipment?
The athlete, the person. It's not a gear equipment, but everything else. Everything else is secondary to me. I find it very uninteresting. 90% of my interest is in the athlete.
All right. And what's a personal habit that's helped you achieve success?
It's good and it's a curse for me. I'm always looking for how we proceed to the next level. I'm always looking for that. And I'm so stupid that even when an athlete has won a race, which happens so few times, and it's a fantastic thing when they do, I'm almost immediately thinking if there was anything we could improve. So it's good because I'm pressing very hard I'm very dedicated to improving them from where they are. But sometimes I also have to be better at just opening the champagne and just sitting down and smiling. So yeah. I think it's an asset for me. It helps me, but I have to control it. Let's say like that. So
yeah, makes a lot of sense. So that wraps it up. Are you on social media? What are the places that people can follow you, find out what you got going on? You have some training camps over there in Mallorca, maybe. So tell the listeners where they can figure out more of that sort of, where they can interact with you and find you.
I'm on Facebook. I post results from my athletes sometimes when I think they have done a great job, because I think they deserve it. I don't do anything else. I'm not on Instagram. I'm nowhere. I hate it. So you can. My name is Frank Jakobsen, and I have the hashtag Coach Frank. So you will probably be able to find me on Facebook there. You're very welcome to follow me. Sometimes I post a lot when there's a lot of racing or we do funny things, and sometimes I don't post at all. I try to go in and then leave. If I don't answer your comments, don't find me arrogant. I just try to limit my time on social media, as I think they're not super productive for our brains. So else we run a thing called Next Level Camp. It's training camps in Mallorca. I run it together with my wife. She's basically running it, and I help out sometimes. And that is called nextlevelcamp.com. We are very hit by the corona, mildly speaking, at the moment. So the season is lost, but we will be back next year. So if anybody wants to come and train, we are there. And if you have any questions or anything, you're welcome to write to me on Facebook or on Next Level Camp. I'm always open, and when I have time, I answer, and when I don't have time, it takes a little long. But if this interview with you, I'm first of all, Michael, to be on the same interview as some of the people you have had, so ridiculously honored that you asked me. And just want to say that to anybody in the corona environment out there, we'll get to the other side. Just keep the passion and for the sport, and everything will go on. And stay safe and healthy out there. That's let's say that's more important at the moment. So I hope everybody does that and we get to the other side. And one thing, stay home, because if you actually like the sport, then we do not want our best athletes to get sick at the moment, because this is a lung infection thing, and we don't want them to get hurt in their lungs. So if your government says stay home, then there is a reason for it. Then do that, and do it as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Frank, for your generous giving of your time and advice. This has been really great. So hope that the listeners will enjoy this, and we'll see you next year on some training camps in Mallorca.
Okay, Michael. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
I hope that you enjoyed that interview. As usual, you can find the show notes on thattriathlonshow.com, which, by the way, I should mention this at this point, because I get quite a few questions about thattriathlonshow.com over time. Isn't it scientifictriathlon.com? And yes, it is. Thattriathlonshow.com is simply a redirect address that will automatically change to scientifictriathlon.com/podcast. So actually from now on, I will simply start referring to go to scientifictriathlon.com rather than thattriathlonshow.com. And then you just click through to the podcast page, and from there you can click through to the show notes. But thattriathlonshow.com is a domain that I created just to have a simple redirect that is easy to read on air and easy to remember. And it will still be working, of course, but for a minimum amount of confusion, I will stop referring to that on these shows and just start talking about scientifictriathlon.com going forward. Either way, on the show notes page, you'll find all the links to the related episodes and links to Frank's coaching bio and his Next Level Camp website. So that's their training camp business. And that's it for the show notes. On Thursday, tune in for the Q&A as usual. And then tune in on Monday when I interview Phil Burt, who is a bike fitter and physiotherapist who has spent a large number of years with British Cycling and Team Sky. So one of the best in the business when it comes to bike fitting and physiotherapy. Now, those house cleaning items I mentioned at the beginning. So again, I have created a free training plan. It's 8 weeks long and is available in 3 different versions, depending on your typical weekly training volume. So one that is 7 hours per week, one that is 12 hours per week, and one that is 17 hours per week. And the premise of this plan is simply to like really build a solid foundation of training and hopefully improve on running and cycling with being able to really focus in on them, but without going to the very limit of capacity and really putting yourself at risk with immunosuppression. So that's not the idea, but there is some hard work there for sure. It's supposed to hit a sweet spot of working hard to improve, but not working so hard that you might be doing when peaking for a race, because there are no races going on in the immediate future. So that plan is something that you can check out on scientifictriathlon.com, and you'll find a link in the menu. It's been downloaded over 600 times already after 4 days of being launched. So I think that is absolutely amazing. And thank you to everybody who has sent in really positive feedback on the plan already. I really appreciate it. And I would encourage everybody who is self-coached to at least have a look at the plan. So download it. And even if you're not going to use it as is, then it can be a great source for just getting some knowledge on training plan structure, and even just a source for getting some new interesting workouts into your rotation. So check it out and let me know what you think. And then the other house cleaning item is about the Insight testing service that we offer. And that's simply the updated protocol that Insight has recently launched. So for those of you that may already have taken the Insight test in the past, you know that it used to be an overpaced 4-minute time trial and an overpaced 20-minute time trial, plus a 15-second sprint. And that overpacing part, meaning that you go as hard as you possibly can at the beginning and then you hang on for dear life, that is something that is very difficult to execute, and that's been something that Insight has been working on to correct and make a better protocol. And they have managed to do that. So now the protocol consists of just simply best possible time trials. So you would pace them at your best possible steady pace, which is a huge improvement because that is a lot easier. It's no less painful, but it's just a lot easier to have an idea of how to pace evenly rather than how to do that sort of overpacing. So now, even though the protocol is flexible, but the standard version of it would be a 20-second sprint, a 3-minute all-out time trial, a 6-minute all-out time trial, and a 12-minute all-out time trial. And with those tests that I generally recommend you do on separate days, so for example, on a Monday, Wednesday, and a Thursday, the sprint can be done on the same day as, for example, the 3-minute test. With that testing, you can get lab-grade, accurate physiological data with just your power meter. You can do it on your trainer, or you can do it out on the roads. So, I'm going through the test myself. I did the 6-minute test yesterday by the time of this recording, but I still have the 3-minute, 12-minute, and 20-second tests to go. But by the time this episode is released, I will have done the test and have gotten myself a new set of inside data to use to make my training more effective. All right, big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that you can find on precisionhydration.com. Go and take the free online sweat test to get an estimate for how much sodium you lose in your sweat and how much electrolytes you need to replace. You can get 15% off your order with the promo code ThatTriathlonShow15. And big thanks to Roka that you can find on roka.com. Check out the new Matador sunglasses. But if sunglasses is not your jam, then you can check out their wetsuits, tri-suits, swimskins, goggles, and high-performance eyewear, other than sunglasses, I guess. And you can get 20% off your order with the promo code that you can find on the landing page, roka.com/TTS. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.